It is literally impossible to buy a house right now.
If I was to try to buy my house today, I genuinely would not be able to afford it.
A lot of our grandparents and our great-grandparents and Gen X and baby boomers, they bought their homes for fucking 13 blueberries and a handshake.
No one has $50,000 to put down on a house.
What's going to happen when the younger generation can't buy the boomers' houses?
I hate to say it, but if you can't afford a house now, the only way you'll be able to afford one in the future is if you make more money.
You know what's crazy? Buying a house used to be one of the most normal parts of becoming an adult. Now it feels like you need a miracle, a six-figure salary, perfect credit, no debt, and maybe a rich uncle just to afford a basic starter home.
How am I supposed to afford this? If you're hoping to own a home one day and you're a millennial or Gen Z, wrap it up, fries in the bag, it's over.
A lot of people aren't even trying to buy mansions. They just want something normal, a small house, a decent neighborhood, a payment that doesn't eat their entire life. But somehow, even that feels out of reach now. So today, I want to talk about why nobody can afford a house anymore, how the housing market got this bad, and why home ownership is starting to feel less like the American dream and more like a luxury product. Let's talk about it.
It is literally impossible to buy a house right now. I currently work 3 jobs. My girlfriend works 2 jobs. We have a bunch of money saved up, and I still cannot buy a house. Otherwise, we'll be completely house poor. I'm so sick of this. I'm so tired of it. We've been working so hard for so long. Both of our credit scores are 700 plus, 720 plus, and we're working our butts off. All we want to do is start our life, live our life, and we can't do it. I'm so tired of it.
I just looked at the estimated value of my house on Zillow, and if the number's accurate, if I were to buy my house today, not even 2 years after I bought my house, if I was to try to buy my house today, I genuinely would not be able to afford it. And I find that so crazy. And for more context, I live on Long Island. So I know the Northeast in general, the house prices are just going up and up and up. I know that for some of the rest of the areas in this country, that's not necessarily the case, but it is the case for here. But like, you guys, this is crazy. Like, how are people supposed to live? And just like strive for like the American dream of like having a house with like a white picket fence. This like, I wouldn't even be able to afford my own house. Not even 2 years later. That's insane.
Young people just don't want to work. They don't want to work hard, and that's why so many young people can't afford to buy a home. Do you know how annoying it is for me to hear that as a realtor? Let's be very clear. A lot of our grandparents and our great-grandparents and Gen X and baby boomers, they bought their homes for fucking 13 blueberries and a handshake. I was doing some research for a video I'm posting later, and somebody bought 80 acres of land in the mid-1800s for fucking $100.
Wow.
That's like unfathomable to me. The average home in America today is going to cost you around $400,000.
Yep.
Are there cheaper homes? Yes. Are there more expensive homes? Yes. Duh. But the average American salary does not align proportionally with that home price.
Not at all.
Meaning, a lot of people can't afford to buy a home. And a lot of people never will be able to. I find it so interesting that people of the older generations are so quick to put blame onto us as the younger people, as if there is not a systemic issue at hand as far as affordability of housing goes. Nobody is saying that our grandmas and our grandpas and their grandparents, they didn't work hard for what they had. Nobody is saying that. But in comparison to where we are at in our economy and in our financial situations today, you can't even begin to make the case that this is a level playing field. I'm sorry. So if you were in a boat where, you know what, you're like, I don't know if I'll ever buy a home, and that's really disappointing. I empathize with you, and I am very sorry. I wish I had more answers given my line of work, but I don't. But just know that you are not the problem. I'm not the problem. They are not the problem. This is so much larger and bigger than all of us individually. And there are going to be people in our lives that just never will understand that.
I actually agree with what she's saying here because I think a lot of older people underestimate just how different the housing market is today. You know, you'll hear people say, well, I bought a house when I was your age, but those homes cost a fraction of what they now cost today. The reality is that many young people aren't avoiding home ownership because they're not working or not smart with their money. They're being asked to buy into a market that's dramatically more expensive than the previous generations entered. And I think that's where some empathy is needed, because if you were 25 years old trying to buy your first home in today's market, chances are you'd be frustrated too. For a lot of young people, the dream of owning a home hasn't disappeared. It just keeps getting pushed further and further away.
One thing I always think about, and it kind of makes me mad, is that our parents and grandparents grew up in the best economy ever. And I'm not going to say they had it easy, you know, especially us, but just imagine that we had their economy now. Let's just take the housing market in 2000. The average house, if they would have bought a house in the year 2000, was between $100,000 and $200,000. And interest rates back then was as low as 2%. Now let's take the year 2025. The average house is anywhere between $300,000 and $500,000. And you have to be lucky, and I'm being very generous with this, to get an interest rate of 4%. People are genuinely signing off on interest rates of 7% now. Not only has the cost of housing doubled, the interest rates have more than doubled. They have so much equity built in their houses because they bought a $150,000 house in the year 2000, and it's worth $450,000 now in the year 2026. So if you're ever wondering why your parents could afford that house, those cars, and raise multiple children, it's because everything was cheaper back then. The houses, the cars were $20,000 brand new. So it's not because we're buying coffee every day that we feel like we're broke. It's because the houses that our parents bought for $100,000 are now $300,000 more. Don't let them gaslight you, because it's not you, it's this dang economy.
Millennials can't afford homes because you like coffee and avocado toast. Like, are you joking? I did the math, okay?
It's not the avocado toast.
Like, if we went and got a coffee and bought a coffee every single day, roughly it works out to be about $1,800, $1,900 each year. Do you know where I can get a home for a down payment of $1,800 to $1,900? Because let me know if you do. This rhetoric that our little treats are what's holding us back financially is just false. And it's kind of what's keeping us playing small.
If I hear one more person ask why millennials aren't buying houses, let me tell you why millennials aren't buying houses. Because me and my fiance qualify to rent a house where the rent is $2,000 a month. We pay $2,000 a month consistently, on time, without fail. But a bank will tell us that we don't qualify to buy a house, that the mortgage is $1,500. And then a country that is trillions of dollars in debt will have the nerve to tell me that my credit score isn't good enough to buy said house. Not to mention that same house that our parents or grandparents paid $180,000 to $200,000 for, yeah, that's now a $400,000 to $500,000 house. And in a world where it's impossible to save money because we literally have to use every dime of every paycheck that we make currently in our current living situation just to survive, no one has $50,000 to put down on a house. So in a world where we would love to own a home with a $1,500 mortgage, we're forced to rent a house for $2,000 because, again, a bank's going to tell me I can't afford the $1,500 mortgage. Make it fucking make sense.
I think sometimes people frame this as just a Gen Z problem when it's really not. There are plenty of millennials struggling too. I have family members that are in that age range who have good jobs, work hard, and by all appearances are doing everything right. But a lot of them are heavily dependent on those corporate paychecks to keep everything running. That's why these layoffs we've been seeing are so scary, because if that income suddenly disappears, it doesn't take long for someone to go from feeling financially stable to feeling completely stuck. And who's to say some of those people wouldn't end up on TikTok a few months later talking about how impossible it is to find affordable housing or get approved for a mortgage. That's why I think this issue goes way beyond one generation. The housing market is difficult enough when you're employed. Losing your job in this environment can make the dream of home ownership feel almost impossible, even for people who thought they were already doing just fine.
I hate to say it, but if you can't afford a house now, the only way you'll be able to afford one in the future is if you make more money. You have to figure out a way to make more income.
Many millennials regret buying homes. This is why it's important for you to run your numbers so that you don't end up house poor. Let me show you what I mean. What you can qualify for and what you can comfortably afford is sometimes two different things. So if you make $100,000, the typical debt to income ratio a lender is going to use when qualifying you is about 40%. That gives you $40,000 divided by 12 months, gives you a monthly allowance of $3,333 if you have no debt. So you could buy probably around a $400,000 house. Your payment would be around $3,300 and you would just qualify and you'd be celebrating. But the next step you must take with your family is, what is your take home pay? If you make $100,000, your take home pay is around what? $6,200? If your house payment without utilities or anything is $3,300, that is 53% of your net pay. This is where you're creeping into the house poor area and you don't want to be there. But I understand your frustration because you're like, hey, I make 100 grand. How can I find anything for under 400,000? Because back in the day, the financially responsible thing to do was to have your house payment be about 30% of your net. But if that were true for someone making 100K today, they would have to buy a $240,000 home, which doesn't really exist in most places. So I understand your frustration. But when you sit down with your lender, also sit down with your family, talk with your lender, and look at your net pay so that you don't end up house poor and you can actually enjoy the home you're purchasing.
They trying to say you need $94,000 to live comfortably in America. What? Who the hell are they talking about? And then this study says if you are two working adults and you got two children, you need to be bringing in at least $209,000. Excuse me? See, the first thing I notice is they're talking about average instead of the median. The median salary for a single adult in America is about $42,000. And the median cost for a standard, like, family, right? 2 kids, right? Is about $78,000. See, this is the game that the media will try to play with you to make you think in your struggle, it's you. No, boo. It's the system. Because basically, the American life is becoming mathematically impossible for most Americans to even live. Right now, the American economy feels like, one of those claw machines. You see the prize, you reach for it, but that claw never actually grabs tight enough to pull it out. So I'm asking, when you hear numbers like this, do they feel realistic to you? Or does it sound like they're describing a life that most Americans will never live?
I'm not gonna lie, seeing numbers like this is kind of insane to me. Growing up, I always thought making 100K a year meant you had officially made it. That was the number everybody talked about. If you made 6 figures, you were successful, comfortable, and probably doing better than most people around you. But now, in some places, that's basically enough to feel financially secure. According to the numbers she's showing, a single adult needs almost $95,000 just to live comfortably. And a family with 2 working adults and 2 children needs over 200K. That's not luxury living. That's not private jets or mansions. That's just being able to pay your bills, handle emergencies, and not constantly stress about money. The goalpost keeps moving. So when people wonder why so many Americans feel financially squeezed, this is exactly why. If it takes close to 6 figures just to feel comfortable, imagine how difficult things are for the millions of people earning far less than that. All right, so here we have an article written by Jaislyn D. John. This was published on March 24th of this year, fairly recent. This reads, salary needed to live comfortably in the US, cities, 2026. All right, so let's just go through the key findings because I don't want to bore you guys to death. New York, NY has the highest individual salary needed to live comfortably at $158,954. San Jose, CA follows closely at $158,080. And these cities have the lowest salary needed to live comfortably. San Antonio, Texas has the lowest salary threshold for both single adults and families of 4 at $83,000 and $192,000 respectively. New Orleans, Louisiana has the second lowest salary needed for a single adult to live comfortably at $84,000, followed by Memphis, Tennessee at $86,000. The Bay Area is the most expensive place for a family to live comfortably. Bay Area cities make up the top 4 or 5 places with the highest salary needed for a family of 4 to live comfortably. Incomes across 2 parents are projected at $407,000 in San Francisco, $402,000 in San Jose, and $371K in both Fremont and Oakland. I don't know how you guys are doing it in Los Angeles. That is a crazy place to be in if you're a single person trying to live in this economy, especially with gas prices. I know in the one video where we talked about the gas prices, people are paying like $100 just to fill up a full tank. That is crazy to me. For those watching this that live in LA, tell me how you guys are doing it, honestly. So down here, we have this beautiful chart that displays the salary needed to live comfortably in the US cities. Cities are ranked by the lowest annual salary needed for a single adult to live in sustainable comfort using the 50-30-20 budgeting rule. And if you'll notice, most of these places are in California. So California seems to be the place not to be if you're trying to save your money. But at number 1, we have New York. This is probably why New Yorkers are so hard and tough and like cold-blooded. You know, I'm from New York. You don't want a piece of me, tough guy, because they have to deal with a lot of bullshit. Tighten up, wise guy. I'm walking here. You made it at the Naples. I want a bacon, egg, and cheese with a side of bacon and an egg and cheese, bacon, egg, and cheese, biscuit, bagel.
What? What's going to happen when the younger generation can't buy the boomers' houses? What do we do? The age is creeping up year by year. At some point, it's just going to be unaffordable.
When people say stuff like you should buy a house while you're young so that you don't have to worry about struggling to pay rent in your like retirement years or, you know, as a senior citizen, I want people to just stop for a second and really think about what you're saying. The fact that you are telling people, hey, you should buy something because having a safe place to live is not a fundamental right in this country is really where the problem is. It is not that, you know, people aren't buying houses or they're not being smart with their money or whatever the case may be. Every single human being should have access to safe and affordable housing, point blank, period. I don't care if you young, if you old, if you're employed, if you're unemployed, it does not matter. Having housing, safe housing, is a basic human right, and it should be treated as such. The commodification of housing not only pisses me off, but it also puts people in a position where if they do not have the capital to acquire property, which we see in the US is becoming increasingly more challenging, then they are subjected to the fluctuations of rent prices, which also continue to skyrocket, and we don't have any sort of rent control. And then we blame these individuals for not having anywhere to go when the economy does not make it possible for a lot of people to buy housing. A lot of these social service programs do not use a housing first model. So if you don't meet all of these requirements, then you cannot qualify for housing assistance. And I just don't understand why we continuously blame individuals for these clearly structural problems. And another thing, nobody should be able to have more than 2 houses, point blank, period. Housing is not a commodity and it should not be treated as such.
I understand where she's coming from because at the end of the day, housing isn't some luxury item that people can simply choose to live without. Everybody needs a place to live. That's why I think we need to be more careful about constantly blaming individuals whether they can't afford a home. Sometimes it's not a budgeting problem. Sometimes the prices are just out of reach. Now, whether you agree with all the solutions or not, or all of her solutions, I do think she's touching on a bigger issue. Over the last several years, housing has increasingly been treating like an investment first and shelter second. And when that happens, regular people often get squeezed out. The conversation shouldn't always start with, what did this person do wrong? Sometimes the better question is, why are so many people struggling with the exact same problem? Because if millions of hardworking people are saying housing feels unaffordable, that's bigger than individual choices. That's a sign that something in the system may not be working the way it should. All right, let's read some comments. Save your money for 3 to 4 years and move somewhere where you can buy property and get into real estate market. That should be the goal for everyone. It's what I did. My mortgage is below $700 and I am not stressed by any means. The entity that took over the government is turning up the heat. Only if America didn't sell out to those people. Now everything is whatever those billionaires want. So sad to see young people can't make a living off of one job as I did in my 20s. Times have changed. A lot of people now have to work 2 to 3 to 4 jobs just to sustain a normal life. I think community is the only way Gen Z will ever survive anything. Hyper-independence is a great skill set to have, but eventually it becomes isolating. Community building can be a part of work-life balance and maybe even help the loneliness epidemic, all while being able to get some resources towards any goals. But that's my 2 cents. Notice all the piercings, nail work, tats, etc. It's called a budget. Live within it. I love how these kids think the previous generations did not deal with the same issues. I moved out at 17 and got married. Moved back home for a week after I got out of the army since it took me that long to find a new house. I refuse to put that extra pressure on my parents. One thing I've noticed is that a lot of people in the military are doing exceptionally better than most people. with the given benefits. Most of my friends who have been in the military or are in the military have their own place, are in the process of getting married, are pretty much on the money. It's just something I noticed. A lot of people in the military are doing quite good. But getting married at 17, that's kind of crazy, not gonna lie. I mean, I guess it was normal back in the day. Y'all are gonna have to realize some older people don't want to understand and they get off at being critical. This isn't all older people and it's not all boomers. I'm Gen X and I see some pick yourself up by the bootstraps, Gen Xers, and some understanding Gen Xers with some sense. You can't convince the assholes, so don't give them the satisfaction of crying, but I get paid this and apartments cost this, cause they get off on it. Sad, but very true. You know, you'll see comments from these videos of people saying that it's their faults or get over it. I think it's hard for boomers to kind of help us or help Gen Z and millennials and people that are struggling in this economy because they don't know what the new way of life is with all this technology, all this AI. But all in all, I do agree that a lot of people are, or at least it's easier to be negative and to kind of laugh and point and say, well, it's your fault instead of actually trying to help people, especially on the internet. It is what it is, unfortunately. I believe citizens of America failed America and themselves with poor life/financial decisions, which caused them to ruin their life/financial lives, but yet blames America for their failures. Regret becomes reality when nobody is coming to save you. Is that a quote from Thanos? The Avengers? Regret becomes reality. No. He said, reality can often be disappointing, something like that. Do better, Americans. A part of me just really doesn't want to agree with these type of comments, but it's like we really don't have an excuse now because there's so many tools that we can use to find information, to find a way. I mean, there's so many ways to become financially stable and literate, but I feel like I'm speaking out of ignorance sometimes, especially in these videos, because I'm in a position where I'm obviously privileged, but not privileged to the extent where I'm not socially aware of the economy, which is why I'm pushing myself to do research with these videos so that I can try to relate to people that are actually struggling on a day-to-day basis. Don't be ashamed of living with your parents, but don't be financially irresponsible either. Yeah, I agree 100%. If you're gonna move back home with your parents, don't take advantage of them. You know, help them out with bills, with rent, whatever it is they need help with. You know, don't be that one guy who just sits around and bums max. What do they call it? Bum maxing, lazy maxing, gooner maxing. You know, don't just goon all day. All right, so these next few comments are coming directly from Instagram since you guys blew up that one video I reacted to. Rent and mortgage are both going up and causing a problem. It's not just rent. People who have houses are also facing their own issues. 100%. Mortgage is definitely going up, and I'm thinking about making a separate video talking about that because there's a whole epidemic of these mortgages going up and people having to find more work outside of their life. They are measuring our economy by the market. That's never ever been the economy. They are not reporting job losses and not reporting any other economic markers. They fired them all. They are crashing the economy and country on purpose. Then they wonder why 1 in 5 American adults are taking antidepressants. It's literally because we thought we would have what our parents had. We are grieving the lives we thought we would have by now. I guess another reason why people are grieving the lives they want to have right now is because of social media. You know, we're comparing our lives to the exception or to the low percent of people that are actually living the life that we want. So it's very hard to cope with that, you know. But yeah, that's just my train of thought. And it's very sad to see that a lot of people are going to alcohol, are going to marijuana, are doing heavy drugs now because it's all cope. Rent is the main issue. It's taking too much of people's income. They are doing this on purpose. Our generation is having its youth stolen and people aren't mad enough, man. It's sad. It is pretty sad to see, not gonna lie. Nobody can own a home anymore. Renting alone is even hard. The middle class hardly exists anymore. You can't climb out of the lower class, and the rich will only get richer unless we dead ass get rid of the whole government and restart. I definitely agree with this. I feel like there's no more middle class. It's just lower class and the rich. And the lower class is struggling right now. And the rich, let's be honest, they don't really care. So the best option, like this comment suggested, is that we turn our head to the government as a whole, as a people. But unfortunately, there's a percentage of people that refuse to do that who have the power. I'm 29 and still live at home. I work, invest my money, and I still sometimes feel financially unstable. There's no point in renting just for the sake of living on your own. Great content. This whole dialogue perfectly frames the struggle right now. Thanks for sharing. Thanks for commenting. 10 to 20 years ago, making $20 an hour was enough for a house, kids, 2 cars, food, gas, bills, savings, and some other leftover for fun. Now it's barely enough to cover rent in a studio apartment, food, bills, and gas. I haven't even had a savings account since I left the military in 2021. My mom raised us on 2 minimum wage jobs, and now most employers don't even allow you to work at 2 companies at once, called a conflict of interest, because these days, loyalty to one company is more important than survival. We're living in times where you have to work 2 jobs. There's no excuse. You simply can't live off of $20 an hour anymore. And if you are, you probably aren't having fun. You probably aren't having the time of your life because you're so focused on surviving. 10 to 20 years ago, making that minimum wage and still being able to have a nice house, a family, a nice car, a nice career, and have a week or weekend hobby is just crazy to think about.
The amount of people that are in their late 20s and early 30s and are still living at home, moving into friends' houses, living with multiple roommates would actually surprise you. There are a lot of people out here that just simply can't do it anymore. People are getting priced out of their apartments. People are getting priced out of their homes. Everything keeps going up except for the wages. When the federal minimum wage in a lot of areas is still $7.25, and rent for a 1-bedroom apartment in a lot of areas here in the US is anywhere from $1,500 a month to $2,000 a month. It's just simply not doable. People are going broke putting gas in their cars. People are going broke going grocery shopping. And it's just not doable anymore.
Yeah.
I don't know if people are going to be able to survive this or not. And there's no wonder why people are going crazy. There's no wonder why people are, going insane when it's quite literally a response to not really having any of your needs being met. This isn't doable anymore. It's not really sustainable. And it literally feels like the end goal is we're all just going to end up dying off. It's rapidly getting worse by the day. And it honestly just feels like nothing is redeemable anymore.
Isn't it crazy how most of Gen Z will never be able to afford a house because the average home price in America is like $400,000, $500,000, even $600,000. It's like, dude, the housing market is crazy.
I live in a place that I can't afford. I work so very hard to not be able to afford to live in Virginia. In my area, everything is so expensive. And for what I do, for the corporation I work for, which is a very big corporation in this area, I still can't afford to live here. Nowadays, you cannot get a decent apartment without paying thousands of dollars to live there. And I'm being told I don't make enough money to buy a home where I live, where I work, where I pay taxes. I can't afford to buy a house. I don't make enough money for that. I think it's just so sad and sucky to put so much work in to look up and realize you only paid bills and taxes and you can't afford to have something of your own without making a ton of money, which you should be able to make the money to live where you work and pay taxes. It makes me so frustrated to be a single mom, to be a full-time worker, to actually do well at what I do and still not be able to have things of my own because the area does not pay its people what it costs to live in the area.
Maybe this is a controversial take, but I honestly think single moms are getting hit harder by this whole housing market than almost anybody else. Because it's one thing to struggle with rent when you're only responsible for yourself. It's a completely different situation when you've got kids depending on you every single day. When I watch videos like this, I don't just see someone complaining about housing cost. I see somebody trying to keep a roof over their children's heads while carrying the financial weight of an entire household. And let's be real, a lot of the single moms don't have another income to fall back on if something goes wrong. There's no second paycheck, no partner to split the rent with, no one else to pick up the slack. But in general, I think a lot of people are one bad month away from being in that exact situation than they like to admit.
We will never have affordable housing in this country again because people have built their wealth on real estate. People will need to lose their homes, lose their investments, lose value in the homes in order for us to have affordable housing. And this is a rough conversation to have because we all have friends who've invested in real estate. Our parents own homes. Our grandparents own homes. We're all being taught to build wealth through real estate, but that directly leads to the housing crisis that we have already arrived at, that we've been at for over a decade. I remember growing up seeing Fox News talking about class warfare, but it's like we working class people, the ones who are the have-nots, we did not ask for class warfare. We asked for our fair share. You took it all. So now if we have to take it back, like, yeah, that might lead to some class warfare. But really, whose fault was that? Like, whose fault was that? And it's not even the people who wanted to invest in real estate. Like, why is there no government national housing option for people who just want a $90,000, $100,000 home? And you might be saying, oh, that's a shack. It shouldn't be. It shouldn't be. The cost of materials to build a home, the land to build a home, not that expensive in a lot of places. In a lot of places it is. But like, we have to be honest about this. Like, when we're all talking about like, yeah, let's like build wealth and build triplexes and rent out things, like, you want to be a landlord? You want to hoard land when you know people can't afford housing, when there's homeless people everywhere? Like, I understand. Like, we're worried. We don't have generational wealth to pass on. For sure. But we will be adding to the problem by continuing to invest in real estate. This whole country, most of the wealth in this country is built off of investing in real estate and starting businesses that then sell for like millions, billions. Affordable housing will bring down the prices of everyone's houses. So that's what's gonna need to happen.
You can't afford a home. In fact, home affordability in the US is the worst it has ever been. And the solution is so easy, it should make you angry. No, it's not because of all the illegal immigrants who are somehow buying up all the houses. And it's actually not even these massive corporations buying up all the single-family homes. The answer is way more basic than that. We simply do not have enough homes. In basically every metropolitan city in America, there is a major housing shortage. It is no surprise that people want to live in these cities. There are way more career opportunities, which means that the salaries are usually way higher, and most people agree that the quality of life in cities is just better as well. So what's the solution? I'll tell you, it's definitely not freezing the rent, which has been shown to decrease housing supply over time. It is simply to build more houses. When there's more demand than there is supply, prices go up. The only effective way to reduce prices is to build more. And so if any politician provides any solution that isn't building more houses, then they are lying to you. The worst offenders are actually usually Democrats or liberals who engage in NIMBYism, or not in my backyard. In cities like San Francisco, there are very strict zoning laws about the type of buildings you can build. So even if there's a lot of demand for you to build more supply, you can't because the local people want to keep the property values high because they're homeowners. Prices for housing and rent in certain parts of America are actually falling. You want to know where they're falling the fastest? Texas and Florida. Why? Because they have added more units of housing than any other states by a mile. Wow, when you add more houses, prices drop. That's crazy. Wait, no, it's not. It's simple supply and demand. Pressure politicians to build.
Yeah, I think he's got a point. At the most basic level, housing is still a supply and demand issue. If you have more people looking for homes than there are homes available, prices are naturally going to rise. The problem is that while demand has continued to grow over the years, housing supply hasn't always kept up. And when you combine that with higher interest rates, rising construction costs, and everything else we've talked about in this video, you end up with the situation we're seeing today. Now, obviously, housing is a complicated topic, and there are a lot more different opinions on what the solution should be. So if you guys want to see a deeper dive into what's causing the housing shortage or what could potentially fix it, let me know and I'll make a separate video on that. At the end of the day, I think the biggest takeaway is that housing has become unaffordable for far too many people. Whether you're Gen Z, a millennial, a single parent, or someone who's been working for decades, more and more Americans are feeling priced out of something that used to be considered a normal part of life. So let me ask you this. Do you think home ownership is still achievable for the average American, or is it slowly becoming a luxury reserved for the wealthy?